Hello and welcome to this new Hessian Scrum. Joining me today is Arawn from Dungeon Serpent. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me on.
So, recently you released, last year, World of Sorrow, which was had quite a bit of exposure. People seemed to really enjoy it because you took like kind of a lot of the, death metal that's really popular nowadays, but you gave it a much more melodic twist. Could you go, why this kind of style?
I guess the origin of the idea, for me at least, was in high school. I think I just wanted to make music that was fairly extreme and brutal, and but also pretty melodic in like a specific way, less separated out the two of them. And I think the main band that probably ended up catalyzing that was the first Cataclysm album. I heard that at some point in high school, and that's kind of where these ideas started to form. And then towards the end, it became like an actual project. But I think it's just I got into metal through traditional metal and power metal, and then got into death metal. And so I've always had a tendency towards more melodic stuff, even within death metal. You were very quiet all of a sudden. I just need to fix that. Sorry.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can. Sorry about that. It just random I couldn't hear. Sorry about that.
Don't worry about it. So nowadays, especially in the last 20 years or so, a lot of these death metal bands, when they have a melodic part, it's very separated. You've got a very strong Beauty and the Beast aesthetic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was the idea, was to kind of avoid that. I think that was that was a very big thing when I was writing the songs for that, and just anything else I do is I don't like it when the bands have the melodic section and the heavy section, and those are two different entities that exist in the same song, but they're very separated out. It's now we have the pretty slow melodic section, now we have the fast section. So I always try to make it the same thing. It's fast and has the melodies, and vice versa. I think for some of the new stuff I do, I even try to do melodic slams occasionally, just to prove that it can be done.
Very curious as to how that will sound.
You'll be hearing it soon enough. There's one of those songs coming out on a split soon.
All right. So on World of Sorrows, right? The self-titled track, it's 11 and a half minutes, and it's completely instrumental. Could you go through with how that song came around?
Oh man. I think it had its origins with some of the others in summer of 2020, and I wasn't really writing it for a long time. And when I sat down to write it, I guess there was that big repeating section that repeats 3 times between the other parts that separate that out. And I guess I underestimated just how long that section was as a whole, because it managed to stretch the thing out to 11 minutes. And I think during that time, I was listening to a lot of 70s rock stuff with the very long extended solos. And that bled into that song a bit, where there's the solos are kind of what carries the length a lot of the time with that song. I was expecting it to be 8 minutes. And when I finally had the drums all programmed out and recorded a demo of it, I realized, oh, this is actually 11. So a lot longer than I anticipated.
Yeah. Production wise on this album, I felt a strong Dismember influence, a very buzzsaw guitar, but with enough kind of every note is still relatively distinct.
Yeah, I mean, the production, I wasn't super because we mixed it in about a week. There was the original mix I did with the guy I recorded it with, which was kind of just not so great. It was very strange. And once Nameless Grave found out about the album and decided to put it out, it got remixed by Andrew. And he pretty much just mixed it in a week. I sent him what I had, the guitar DIs and stuff, and he just did that. But the guitars were done through a certain pedal I own, which is not the same thing Dismember used. That has just a very over the top sound to it. He got it sounding very good. I think the one thing I sent to him as a production reference was the first Amon Amarth EP, which is different sounding than Dismember in terms of production, but still was like very distorted and loud, but pretty clear. But yeah, I can see a Dismember comparison to that tone a lot, I guess.
Yeah, I always I'm kind of tired of that tone nowadays. It was so iconic back then, and people just kind of are obsessed with that HM2 pedal.
Yeah, I have one that I use for live shows just 'cause it's kind of reliable, but I prefer like to try to do my own thing, and it sounds similar, but I think the big problem with a lot of HM2 stuff these days that makes it so like annoying to a lot of people is it's just very like it's gone from being some like raw fucked up thing people did because they didn't know like how to actually dial in a guitar tone to be this thing where it's like, you go into the studio and you go through like whatever, some crazy $1 million amp and get the like best, most polished and clean HM2 tone you can. So it's kind of like it's just become another thing people do instead of like some weird sort of experimental like mistake.
Oh yeah, completely agree. But you recorded the tracks on this album on DI, so you went through the pedal straight into your sound card.
Yeah, so that was how we did it. I recorded it with a guy in my neighborhood. He was like an EDM producer, but he, managed to engineer a death metal album well enough. But I mean, I was kind of an idiot and just decided to DI the pedal with like every knob turned to the maximum. And I mean, it had a very good result ultimately, so I'm not going to complain. It sounded good, but it was like a very not orthodox or wise way of recording an album.
Yeah, because you did the album completely by yourself, and then you got a live band after that, right?
Yeah, technically the drummer was in the band at that point, but because of like work and shit, and there was just a lot of lockdown stuff at the time, like winter of 2020 when I was like finally had all that done. That we just didn't have time to learn the entire album, so I did it with a drum machine instead. But there was plans originally to do it with actual drums.
Yeah, so I'm guessing from now on your next releases will be with an actual drummer.
Yep, we were just recording drums like 2 weeks ago, and also our bassist did his bass parts. So yeah, we're doing future stuff with an actual drummer for sure.
So is the next releases, are they going to be done with the entirety of the band, or are you going to really be at the helm of everything and just engaging certain musicians to fill out your vision?
I still write everything pretty much. Like I write all the guitars. The studio lineup's basically me doing guitars, vocals, and some keyboards, and then our bassist does his bass parts, our drummer does his drum parts. Like if I have a specific idea for a section, I'll tell them, but they kind of generally fill out their own stuff within the songs, which is good. And then our live guitarist, she just does guitars live, but she also we've been doing a different project together, a black metal project, and her vocals are really good, so that those are certainly going to be showing up on new material. So I guess like she contributes some session vocals as well.
Yeah. So can you tell us about all the stuff coming up, because you kind of mentioned multiple releases?
Yeah, there's some newish tracks we're recording for a tape re-release of our first demo. One of them's like an entirely new song, and the other one's like a re-recording of Necroscope with a bunch of things that have kind of been changed to make it better, and also real drums. And then there's a split with another band that has one new song, an Edge of Sanity cover, and a re-recording of Immortal Incubation from the first album, but again with some things changed to kind of make it better. Like I've had more ideas to just improve the song. And there was also a promo demo featuring some of that, like rough recordings of some of that stuff that was put out this summer. Um, uh, but yeah, that's kind of what we have on the table right now.
Yeah. So let's dive in a bit more into that kind of style, right? Because you nowadays, people really are either, it's kind of like, oh, let's play OSDM, play it exactly how it was in the 90s, or let's do the opposite, play brutal, slamming, whatever.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. I mean, I'm not like, there is like a lot of sort of black and whiteness within death metal, I guess, where it's you're doing one style or you're doing another style. There's not a lot of blending it. Like a lot of bands just decide that they want to write Entombed, Morbid Angel, whatever. And then a lot of bands just decide that they want to write completely modern stuff. And there's not a lot of blending of that, which, I mean, I things can be fine either way, but it would be cool if people took a less like one or the other way approach to these things.
Yeah. So, what do you feel like you kind of bring towards this kind of new, like, we can't even call it a movement, it's only you that's really in this style. Like, what can we expect more? What are some elements you want to incorporate into your music or experiment with?
Well, the next album, which I've kind of like, it's in rehearsals at the moment. It's gonna be like maybe just a bit more over the top. It's pretty like comparable to stuff like old Depressy, the first Septic Flesh album, Garden of Shadows. It's pretty much just like full on atmospheric death metal done like it's still very like aggressive, but now we have a lot of keyboard parts and violin parts. I'm working with someone around here, and like it's I was talking with them the other day about the violin parts, and I think we have a pretty like classical and orchestral vision for how this is going to turn out. It's not going to be like cheesy fucking like God, what's that band? That it's not going to be like symphonic death metal in the terms of like modern Septic Flesh or something. It's going to be a lot like more evil sounding and like tasteful. It's not just going to be like chugging over a fucking orchestra playing Harry Potter music or something.
Yeah, I mean, Septic Flesh is the perfect example of that. Like, you listen to the first one, even Temple of the Lost Race, Ophidian Wheel, all that.
Yeah.
And it's just beautiful. It's like, but it's very sparse, in terms of kind of all the orchestration. And then over later, yeah, it did become Disney meets kind of, chugs. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's the same. Like, it's not every second we're having violin and keyboard parts going on the new album. It's more like the climactic parts you would have heard on the first album. Now those are more augmented with other things. And there's even parts like some of the faster parts will have a bit of keyboard and violin, kind of like how At the Gates would have done it on their first album. I don't know if it's as like well done as that. I don't know if I can make music on that level, but it's the aim, I guess.
Yeah, I mean that's a great objective to reach, which is funny. I never understood why why that album has gone so under the radar. It's a bit more popular now, but no one's ever tried to kind of replicate that insane style.
I mean, I guess it's because as a whole, maybe things are a bit less naive now. I mean, a lot of those old albums that are so crazy, it's so crazy because they didn't quite know what they were doing. They were just throwing ideas at the wall, and they happened to throw them in such a way that it came out like they had the right level of technicality and ambition, and also not quite knowing what they were doing to make something that sounds truly like just out there and crazy and like makes you think. And I think like metals, like death metal, as it's solidified as a genre more, has just increasingly, like there's rules to it now that people think they have to follow, as opposed to just like, whatever, we're going to make some crazy fast music and we're going to do this and we're going to do this and all that. But now it's more like, oh, you have to do this. to a lot of people. It doesn't have to be that way, but I think a lot of people have started thinking like that, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. It's a sad state of affairs. It should be something completely free flowing and open to the imagination.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's not a lot of limits to something like death metal or black metal where it was just started as like crazy fucked up noise basically. So you can kind of do whatever you want as long as it is crazy on some level, or just like, I don't know. There's just a atmosphere that defines it, but I think when too many tropes get established, it starts to just become like, oh, we're a death metal band, we're gonna write like Cannibal Corpse now, as opposed to like trying to do anything that out there.
Yeah, completely agree. Out of all the elements that you've discussed, experimenting with, you haven't mentioned clean vocals. Is that something that you're not interested in at all?
Well, that actually is. There's like maybe 2 parts on the next album where I've been thinking of putting some in, like in the Time Ghoul style. I'm not a very good vocalist, so that's about as much as I can do. Um, I think like there's a lot of things that have clean vocals that turn out pretty good in my opinion, and there's a lot of things where it detracts from the song quite a bit. Because I mean, I've been listening to, for an example, the first On Thorns I Lay album. That's pretty good, but those clean vocals really suck, um, and could have been done a lot better. So there's a big risk in doing them because it takes a lot of skill to sing. Singing's not that easy of a thing to pull off convincingly, especially in a genre like death metal. So it's something I'm playing around with the idea of, but I need to think I could do it convincingly before I actually committed to that. But I've been thinking of it.
Yeah, definitely an interesting thing. I always thought that the kind of best way to do in that style was to say, the Second Dark Tranquility album, and fuse both styles really well.
Yeah, well, the cleans on that always. I mean, the first one has cleans, but I don't think the cleans on the first one are very good. But the second one, like the ones on "Punish My Heaven," or if might be remembering that song title wrong, like the part where the cleans briefly come in is very good. It works very well because it doesn't detract too much. It's just there for a bit and augments the song.
Yeah. I mean, do you feel that when bands use them nowadays, it's like, I know, it always felt to me like, oh, we can be really emotional. We can be on the same level as pop or rock bands. Look at us. We're not just crazy people.
Yeah, I mean, in the certain like kind of more modern more modern metal style, it certainly like ends up like that, I think. They kind of have that way where it's like this is heavy and catchy and melodic and has hooks. Like you start going into the Bogren core, like Finn McKenty mentality, where it has to be like, it has to have hooks and be heavy and be accessible. But that doesn't impact like the underground too much, thankfully. I don't think there's not a lot of like underground bands who have this mentality where it's like, oh, we have to have like these big hooks that whatever like rednecks can sing along to.
Yeah. I mean, because a lot of those melodic death metal bands we've been talking about, even yours, there are some very obvious kind of homages to a lot more of the anthemic heavy metal and power metal stuff. But do you think like for it to be done in extreme metal, you can't just slam a chorus 15 times in a song? Like how do you get the anthemic part? Like, because you can't overstate it. It just sounds cheesy.
I don't I don't know how like anthemic I ended up making the thing sound because I have like a really linear style of songwriting, or especially on that I did. And like it's hard to be anthemic when you're changing ideas like every 4 repetitions and just never bringing them back. Um, I mean, I don't know where the line quite sits. Like I can't define where something goes from being kind of epic and in a good way to becoming a bit like just corny and stupid. I think it's when you start like overdoing it in a very like clearly overdone way. Like you could probably point to like a new In Flames album, and that's pretty goddamn corny when they bring in the fucking like I'm not gonna replicate what those sound like, but anyone who's heard one of those new albums kind of knows what the choruses sound like. That's corny as fuck. But I think like if you tastefully place a more like climactic section in a song, that is a good use of it. I think if it fits the general style of everything else cleanly, it won't feel too cheesy maybe. But I don't have a very clear answer for this, I don't think.
Yeah, I definitely agree. You know, it works well when it's really the kind of big climatic part, and it doesn't try to stick out too much, you know, because those In Flames stuff, like when it goes to the clean part, it's just a million times more overproduced than the rest of the stuff because that guy just can't sing. I can't remember his name. Anders.
I think he does some singing on some of like the earlier stuff. I forget what album, but he does some all right singing occasionally, but like now he's just, I don't know, on the new, I'm not like, I don't care what In Flames is doing these days that much. It doesn't like, I stopped paying attention after a certain year, but you know, like it's pretty fucking corny and unconvincing.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So, you know, tell us about like what more information can you give us about your newer releases?
I mean, I don't know. I think the original song we've done for the split, that one's pretty cool. Obviously, I'm releasing it. I wouldn't release it if I didn't think that, but um, that one is it never it didn't put it on the album because I wrote that around when I was writing the second album. Because it felt a bit more like a brutal death metal song. It's a pretty short song. I don't know. I mean, I'm hesitant to describe the new stuff because I just kind of want to let it speak for itself when it comes out. But the original song we're doing for the demo reissue is a demo in turn of the first song on the next full length. So that's kind of, that one will serve as a kind of preview of what the next full length is going to sound like, I think, in some part.
Yeah, definitely. So he's still gonna go for the kind of you know the harsh bus saw guitar tone, or is it gonna be radically different?
I don't know. I mean, the other day we were reamping the guitars and trying to figure out what we're gonna do, and I think most like engineers like to go for a more low gain sound. I just like going for a more high gain sound. I think I'm kind of splitting the difference a bit, so it's going to be maybe less distorted than it was before, but still pretty distorted compared to a lot of things. I mean, I don't know. I'd hope it could sound like similar to the first album. I thought that just sounded really good. So yeah, I'm probably gonna stick with that whole sound because I thought it was amazing.
Yeah, definitely. I can see that. All right. So no new titles or anything yet.
Oh, like the titles of the new songs?
Yeah, titles out. This title of the split. Anything you can give us?
Oh man, I don't know what the title of the split is. Me and the guy from the other band are kind of like working on something. We haven't really like decided yet, but the titles of the songs on the split is the original song we did is Frigid Dismemberment. There's a demo of that on the internet somewhere I put out. No one's really found it. But then we're doing a cover of Dark Day by Edge of Sanity. As I said, a re-recording of Immortal Incubation with some parts changed. And then there's a little piano outro thing called Spectral Avernus. And then for the tape songs, it's just a re-recording of Necroscope and a new song called Ashes from the Temple, which is an instrumental.
All right. That's great. Well, I think, you know, any final words?
Shit. I can't think of anything. But right. Yeah, thanks for having me on. That's, I think, the big thing.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah. Good day.